probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
So do you.
I mean, I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Critch. But
hey guys, I'm Bud Elliott. That's Austin Hannon, and that means we're talking Clemson today because Austin is our beat guy at Clemson 247. Austin, welcome to summer school, man.
Appreciate it, Bud. How's it going?
Doing well, man. Doing well. This is the fourth or fifth that we are doing today, and I still have a lot of energy for it because it is the first day that we are doing summer school. Check back when I'm on like episode 50. But I like doing these because I like college football and I like to learn a lot about some of the best teams in the sport. And Clemson is obviously one of those. Little bit of a disappointing season last year relative to, I think, some fan expectations, but certainly a lot of young bright spots as well. Let's start on a positive note. Like, where do you think this team is clearly better than it was last year?
I think just experience. I think Dabo's talked a lot about that. Last year was a pretty young team. They dealt with a ton of injuries at wide receiver, and so you didn't really get to see Garrett Riley's offense. Maybe, we saw it at a high level at TCU. Obviously, they made it to the national championship game. Clemson goes out, pays a ton of money to get him, and then the offense really wasn't good last year. And so, fans are kind of upset about that. And he's the highest paid assistant coach, I think, in the entire sport right now. And the offense wasn't great. It was obviously the weak spot of the team. You can blame that on quarterback play. You can blame it, like I said, on the wide receiver injuries. But all those things are kind of, you can't really use that as an excuse this year, I don't think, as long as people do stay healthy. There's been a lot of talk about the offense throughout spring ball and how, the second year of a system of an offense and getting used to it for Cade Klubnik, like that kind of stuff is very important. Obviously, there's still a lot of guys that are battling it out, especially at the center position on the offensive line. They've got a deep receiver room that's got two true freshmen in there now, TJ Moore, and you've got Bryant Wesco, of course, who was great in spring ball, a little undersized, but I think both those guys could see the field pretty much day one in Atlanta on August 31st. And of course, there's the defense is going to be just as good as I think it's been the last 2 or 3 years under Wes Goodwin. Barrett Carter, obviously the star there, comes back for his senior season. Could have gone to the NFL, but he really decided that he wants to win a national title. Sammy Brown, the true freshman linebacker, is going to be in there. I think the secondary obviously lost Nate Wiggins, but guys like Tavoy Fegan, the freshman. You've got Shelton Lewis and Avion Terrell, of course, the younger brother of AJ Terrell, who's in the NFL now. Going to be a good secondary, going to be a good defensive line. That's what kind of Clemson's known for. I expect it to be kind of the same way this year. You've got Peter Woods and TJ Parker, who were both freshmen last year. I want to say Parker was an All-American freshman. Woods was right there. I mean, they were both great, and I think they're going to probably be two of the better players on the team this season. So there's a lot, I think, of optimism. Obviously, we just finished up with the transfer portal window, and people are going to say whatever they say about how Clemson treats that, and that's the way it's going to be. It's Clemson, so they've got a good team. If everybody could stay healthy, I don't think there were too many huge departures in the portal window. Obviously, Andrew Makuba went to Texas. He was a 2-year starter. But other than that, they've got the depth, they've got the players. I think if they can get strong quarterback play from Cade Klubnik, who, our people at 247 rated him pretty well out of high school, if he can kind of turn into that player, get more accustomed with the offense this season, I think there's really a lot of optimism that, with the expanded playoff field, this team can be in that.
Yeah, I have not necessarily doubts, although some, but more just questions about the offense. I felt like last year when I was watching them, it was sort of like fits and starts because of all the receiver injuries and just tracking it week to week. It's like, okay, this guy's out. Now this guy's out. Now, okay, this guy's in. No, he's not in. He's actually out. All that kind of stuff. If everybody's healthy, is it Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, and Adam Randall? Like, is that the main trio that we're expecting here?
Well, I mentioned at the top, I do think those two true freshmen are going to be really good. That's TJ Moore and that's Bryant Wesco. Moore was a 5-star. Wesco was a 4-star in this 2024 cycle. You mentioned Antonio Williams. I think he's probably the top receiver coming back. People kind of forgetting about Tyler Brown, I think, who was a freshman last year, was really, really good, and then got hurt, has missed all of spring ball now, and so he didn't really get to get all that kind of hype going into the season. But he's going to be back this summer, and number 6 in orange is going to be a really good player. Adam Randall, that's a guy that's frustrated a lot of fans because he's got the size, he's got the talent, but he's kind of been a guy that, year in, year out, you don't know if he's going to be healthy. I think the same goes for Troy Stellato, who they want to see in the slot this year. He's an experienced guy that, he kind of reminds you of a Hunter Wentz.
Okay. All right.
Kind of reminds you of a Hunter Renfrow, a guy that's not huge, but he can play in the slot. He's got strong hands. He can make plays on 3rd and short. And then, Cole Turner really fast. I think they've been really high on the Ronan Hannafin, who's a sophomore now. So everybody's just kind of year by year growing. And this is not something you can see in every program. And I think that's what's still a little bit special about Clemson, is that there is still that year to year, like, okay, this guy was a freshman. He didn't play as much, but now he's going to be better as a sophomore. He's going to be better as a junior. Whereas other programs, you might not get to see that progression because of the portal and players leaving and wanting playing time. But I think there's a lot of receivers in that room that have kind of stuck around and are going to be battling it out. And I think there's a lot of competition in there. There's not a lot of, okay, I'm just going to get the receiver spot, right? For a guy like Adam Randall that's been around, he's a veteran. He should play, but he has to perform, or else these true freshmen that are coming in are going to play over him. So I think there's a lot of determination in the room, and I think that could help moving forward this season for a lot of those guys.
Makes sense. Where do they see the biggest opportunity for improvement with Cade Klubnik?
I think it comes down to the Garrett Riley thing. I think they kind of this spring have said, look, last year we kind of were just thrown in there. He was obviously a late hire. I think he didn't come into the program until January or February after the season ended. And it was kind of a quick turnaround. Okay, here's spring ball starts. Oh, well, we've got 10 wide receivers that are out hurt. Okay, so you don't get to see and work on any of that during the spring. And then the summer comes fast. And then next thing you know, the season's here and the injuries didn't really stop. So I think they're confident in the fact that if they can keep everybody healthy, have good offensive line play, that's going to be enough to help Cade Klubnik take that next step. So he obviously still has to do it. I think he knows that. He was pretty open about his struggles last season, this spring, and how, just the little things of like, okay, like just having the receivers around, having a consistent offensive line in practice where I know who I can throw the ball to, where it's not week in, week out, who's going to be the receivers on my team. There's no chemistry there. There's no, week after week, you want to have the same guys in that lineup with you. And I think this spring they've been able to kind of build that chemistry. And I think adding the 2 freshmen that I keep mentioning is going to be a huge help too, because Clemson's had a severe lack of downfield explosiveness in the passing game.
Yes.
The last couple of years. And that's something we got used to with, Sammy Watkins and Mike Williams and all these receivers that have come through the program. They haven't had that recently. And so you've seen that drop off in talent. And so you've seen the drop off in success on the field. And I think that might be the next thing that they can take this season and get Cade Klubnik kind of back and comfortable in the second year of the offense.
And they get Jake Brenningstool back as well.
Yes, Jake Brenningstool. Haven't mentioned him.
Player.
I actually knew him in high school. He graduated from the same high school as me in Nashville, Tennessee. So shout out to him. He is a great player. He took a huge stride last year. And I think another good season under his belt this year is going to be a pretty good NFL player with his body type.
No doubt about it. So offense, I for sure, should take a step forward. It'll be important to start fast because in the first 5 games, they play Georgia neutral at NC State or home against NC State.
It's home.
At FSU.
Correct.
That's not super easy.
No, it's not. And they've got, there's already been a little bit of chatter about that week 2 game. If they go to Atlanta and get beat around by Georgia, like some people expect, you got to come home and play App State the first game the home opener. And that's not really a pushover. We've seen them go to College Station a couple years ago and get a win. So that's a good program. I do think they have not necessarily a favorable schedule, but I think it's a schedule that if we're talking about Clemson, a team like we've seen them in the past win championships, there's winnable games on the schedule. Obviously, you have the one in Atlanta against Georgia. You got to go to Tallahassee. But I think other than that, every other game on that schedule, we would expect this program, year in, year out to win. I mean, you've got to go to Blacksburg, but is Clemson a better program than Virginia Tech? I think you would say so.
Yeah, you'll be favored.
You've got NC State at home. You've got, a lot of your conference games at home. So you've got the South Carolina game at the end of the year at home. So I think the schedule lines up favorable for them, where if they go 10-2 and their 2 losses are at Georgia, or essentially at Georgia, and then at, Florida State in October, that's probably a team that makes the playoff. I think, it would get a little weird if Florida State wins the conference and, that starts coming down to, do they want to take another ACC bid because it's kind of a weaker league? So obviously the game at Florida State is going to be huge for a lot of reasons. Obviously seeing DJ on the other side is going to be a big thing. But that game is without a doubt the most important game on the schedule, because I think Georgia's more of a free money situation where things could obviously go very poorly. If you lose the game by 30, like Florida State did in the bowl game, lose by 40, obviously things are not going to be, it's going to be really bad. But if you get there and you lose by 10, you lose by 7, and you learn things about your team in this new age of college football, one loss isn't going to kill you, especially to Georgia. So I think that's kind of more of a, hey, this is a week 1, let's learn about ourselves game. But that matchup at Tallahassee is going to be something special and something really important for both teams.
Defensively, it wasn't really a surprise to me that Wes's defense was still really good because I'd always heard good things about him as sort of like the guy that Venables was would bounce ideas off in the room, and that Dabo had a lot of trust in, even if he wasn't necessarily like a nationally known name. Of the guys that Clemson lost to the draft, who will be the easiest to replace and who will be the most difficult on defense?
Yeah, I think I shouldn't use this as the easiest to replace because Nate Wiggins is such a great talent. But like I said earlier, I do think the younger defensive backs coming up in that secondary are really, really good. So I don't really think there will be too much of a step down from that. Jeremiah Trotter was such a huge part of the defense. And so, you've got Barrett Carter back, but how does Wade Woodaz fit into Jeremiah Trotter's spot? Will Shipley obviously was a top 10 runner in Clemson history, and it's hard to kind of, just replace that. But then you've got Phil Maffa coming in, who we saw plenty of late season last year, where it's like, okay, that doesn't look like it's going to be too tough to replace either. So I think the guys that got drafted, it's not necessarily the end of the world because of the depth that they have returning. And like we've said, that's not something that every program can really boast about. Hey, we lost 6 or 7 guys to the draft, but we feel pretty comfortable because we have these recruits that have been kind of hanging around for a year or two, and they're about ready to take their next step. So I would say the hardest to replace might be Jeremiah Trotter, just because he was the Mike linebacker. He has been the kind of quarterback of that defense for a while. But I'm really confident in Wade Woodaz. I think he's going to be a great player. He's, there's been a lot of positive talk around him. And like I mentioned earlier, there's Sammy Brown right around the corner if you need, a replacement at linebacker at some point. A top 50 player in last year's class, 5-star. So, I think losing some of those draft guys obviously is going to hurt. It hurts for everybody, but I think Clemson has, players in place at most of those positions that aren't really a concern.
All right, you're sitting down Thursday night, you get word from an inside source, hey, like this position room, they're all out with or like the starters are out with an illness, or this one. What are like the 1 or 2 position rooms for you that you're most confident in the depth? You're like, you know what? I'm not changing that preview. They're good there.
I've got to go. I want to say wide receiver, which that might be, a questionable decision just because we haven't necessarily seen the production yet because of the injuries and because of, this and that. But they've got, I 7 or 8 guys deep, I think, that could play on any Saturday. And some of those guys are really talented. So I would think wide receiver is one of those that you don't want them to all get hurt again. But if you lose 1 or 2, there's going to be other guys that are there to step up. I think secondary, like I said, cornerback, I think they've got good options there. They've got young guys, Shelton Lewis, Khalil Barnes, might see him in the slot, might see him at safety. I think they really might miss, Andrew Makuba moving on to Texas, going home to Austin to play for the Longhorns, just because if they had kept him, they would have had a surefire spot there at safety. But defensive back, wide receiver, I think those are positions they feel confident in. I think linebacker's another one. And defensive line, obviously at Clemson always is going to be a strong suit. So I think on the other end, quarterback's really one that if Cade Klubnik gets hurt this season could turn around pretty quickly just because of the options behind him. Christopher Vazina is not really proven yet. He didn't look great in the spring game. Obviously, he's got a big arm. He's a big, tall, physical kid, but a little bit, of a more, raw talent player where he needs to he didn't play at the highest level in high school. And so this transition to college has been a little bit different. And so he's kind of had to get used to that. And of course, that's really all they have. That's the only 2 scholarship quarterbacks they have. After that, you're kind of digging into, walk-on territory and, player coach Paul Tyson territory is the 4th string right now. So, there's question marks at quarterback, but I think, Klubnik's been banged up in his career. He's a pretty tough kid. I wouldn't expect, him to, really struggle with an injury problem. But if he does, I think that would be that kind of the killer of the season this year if that was to happen.
Makes sense. All right, got to address it before we get out of here. The transfer portal, the only 4 teams in the country that, as of this recording, did not take a transfer: Army, Air Force, Navy, and Clemson. And like the kid song goes, like one of these things is not like the other. Right. Like unless Clemson is running a secret military academy of which I'm unaware. it's not even really worth it to debate the merits of like, should you take a transfer guys or not? But like, where are the spots that this team could have most benefited from a transfer?
Offensive line. I think that was the big thing. And they're still trying to figure out who's going to be the center. And there were obviously a lot of offensive linemen in the portal. I know that's one of the positions that's probably the most expensive. If you're out, you're out there on the market looking for one, offensive and defensive line is probably not where you want to look just because of the price. But anybody and everybody can use offensive linemen. And I think Clemson's in that boat too. I think a lot of people would have liked to seen them maybe get, an emergency option at quarterback. When we saw Jaden Rashada go to Georgia, they don't need a quarterback, but they're thinking, hey, if something happens to Carson Beck, or hey, next year we might need a quarterback, there's your time to go get one. And I think Clemson missed that opportunity. There were plenty in the portal. But like you said, I mean, the fans have heard enough about the portal. They kind of, I think mostly my takeaway is that since I've been here for 3 or 4 months, they're kind of done hearing about it. They kind of understand and realize that, hey, we're probably not going to do it. It's not worth talking about. And I think there's 2 different ways you can look at it. Dabo Swinney, obviously, he's made it clear he wants to build, depth within his own team, within high school recruiting. He's not interested in going and just spending $1 million on a player that's never been on campus and never done this and that. And I think there's a respectable point to it where it's, I think everybody, college football fans growing up loving the sport, you saw the game like they still run it. You get the guys as freshmen. They're obviously raw talents. But by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're able to kind of take that step and be the stars on your team. And so I think it's respectable to kind of look at the program and be like, okay, I like the way they're doing things because you look around the country now and it's almost some of the time, the sport doesn't look like you once realized it was. Like back in the day when you loved it, it was like, it's just a lot different. But at the same time, like you said, Air Force, Navy, Army, Clemson, like that's almost it's almost unbelievable that that's still a thing and that they say that they're trying to get portal guys, but I mean, what does that mean? And so, yeah, it's been a huge topic of debate, obviously, in this fan base. And I think everybody's kind of hoping that these changes that we're hearing are coming to the sport are going to come. And once they do, things are going to kind of go way back to the way they were before. And if that's the case, Dabo didn't sacrifice any of the culture. He didn't sacrifice any of the things that he's built the program on. And so they're hoping that there is a light at the end of the tunnel where this thing will get fixed. And at the end of the day, everybody will say, man, Dabo was right. Remember when everybody was out there kicking guys off their team and bringing in guys that they didn't even know before the week they called them? And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And if the opposite happens and the sport continues to drift away from what we kind of once knew it as, how long does Dabo last, right? I mean, that's kind of been talked about a lot. Is this going to be a thing where if this continues in this direction, is he going to eventually say, hey, I don't recognize this sport anymore and I kind of want to step away? Or is it going to go from, hey, this sport's weird to, oh, okay, there's now rules in place and everything's kind of quieting down and everything's going back to normal, and Dabo was smart to do it the way he did it. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to see play out over the next couple of years for sure.
Absolutely. Austin Hannon, Clemson 24/7. Dude, really appreciate the time today.
Absolutely.